Welcome to the Build Your Private Practice podcast, a space for Canadian therapists who want to support others, make an impact, and build a sustainable practice that works for them too. I'm your host, Liane Wood, a registered psychotherapist, group practice owner, and business mentor, and I'm here to help you build a private practice that allows you to keep doing the work you love without burning out. Because the people who need your help the most are counting on you, and you deserve a practice that supports you while you support them. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Build Your Private Practice podcast. I'm so glad you're here. If your private practice has started to grow, but you're secretly struggling to keep up behind the scenes, you are not alone, because growth doesn't always equal ease. And sometimes what looks like success on the outside can feel like chaos on the inside. And so today's guest is here to help us change that. Samantha MacKinnon is a systems strategist and a founder of Samantha MacKinnon Co., where she helps online business owners streamline operations, design scalable offers, and make confident, strategic decisions without burning out. In this episode, we're going to talk about the difference between growth and scale, how to spot the signs that your systems aren't supporting your success, and how one small operational shift can make a big impact fast. Whether you're thinking about expanding your team, adding a new offer, or just trying to make your day to day less chaotic, this episode is packed with clarity and next steps. So, Samantha, welcome. It's so great to have you here on the show.
Thank you. Wow, that was quite the intro.
Yeah, well, can you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and maybe what drew you to this work and why systems matter so much?
Ooh, yeah. Well, yes, and doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So, some of the background on me is that I actually have a whole career that happened before I launched my business, which I think is a lot the case for a lot of folks when they are
Mhm.
kind of doing the online and the digital business thing. Started somewhere else, kind of wanted to start off something on their own. So that's very much the story with me. I worked in construction project management for almost a decade, various roles. I started after university, and I was administration, and actually started to be on some of our larger multi-million dollar projects, and actually part of those project management teams. So that was really where I got my start as far as this whole systems and operations and business development goes. And I realized that that industry, construction as a whole, was maybe just not the right fit for me. And it was very demanding, and I worked a lot of hours, and I had to move away from my family for one
Mm.
project. And I
Mhm.
was, almost 4 hours away,
Wow.
driving back on the weekends.
Mhm.
And so that was just a lot. And I realized that that was not going to be conducive to what I saw for the rest of my life. And so that's when I decided to kind of go off and do my own thing. And eventually I took that business full time. So I
Mhm.
actually started as a general virtual assistant. I offered a lot of general admin. I did content creation. At that time I did a lot of social media. I did emails. I did other, different marketing tasks, and helped with strategy in that sense. And then I realized when I was working with the clients that I had been working with for a couple of years that there was folks that were really great at social media, and there were folks that were really, really great at marketing. And these were things that I sort of picked up along the way. And I had my own lifestyle blog for a while, and
Mhm.
I was familiar with it, but I certainly wasn't an expert. I didn't have the background to kind of set me apart, if you will. But I
Mhm.
also realized that the folks that I was working with really needed somebody from that operational team management sort of top level strategy perspective. And so I kind of started offering that to the clients that I had with me at that time, and my roles sort of morphed with them, and then I rebranded my business, and the rest is history. That's that's how I got to here. Um,
Mhm.
and I think the ultimately, when we talk about the importance of systems, what I know is that if you are looking to grow or scale in any way,
Mhm.
you do need some sort of system. And I know a lot of folks automatically think tech, systems or
Mm.
tech or automation, and that is true to a degree, but I want to just debunk that right off the hop and just explain that systems are just routines that we have, and they
Mhm.
may be automated and they may be tech driven, or they may be something as simple as having a standard day in your week where you make your meal plan and grocery list for the week and you order your groceries. That in itself is a system that supports your lifestyle. So I just wanted to clarify that systems does not always or not exclusively mean tech and automations.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good because I think you're right. I think people can get overwhelmed
Yeah.
at the thought, right? Of that. Wow. Okay. So let's talk about what we can't always see. What do you think are some of the hidden signs that a practice looks successful, but is maybe barely holding it together behind the scenes?
That's a good one. I think the thing that I hear a lot from the founders that I worked with, and I have worked with several private practitioners as well that are growing associate practices or they're offering courses in different programs, kind of going that one-to-many model. One thing that I would say is that there always seems to be a problem that once that problem's solved, everything will be fine.
Mm.
Once I hired the right person, everything will be fine. Once I finish this particular project, everything will be fine. And what I realized is that there's a lot of growth happening, right? They're trying to keep up with the different initiatives, they have goals, they're moving forward on that, but they're feeling overwhelmed and a lot of the business still lives in their brain.
Mm.
So it's again lacking systems, lacking documentation,
Mhm.
lacking even something as simple as having a way to easily document something that you do that you don't have to, right? It's not totally necessary as the founder of the practice to do that task, but if you don't have a way to delegate that in a way that anybody you're bringing in can sort of hit the ground running, you don't have an SOP, you don't have a video walkthrough, you don't have the trust that they're going to do it right,
Mhm.
it can be really hard to truly get to that next level, whether that's in growth in terms of diversification of revenue or in scale, which is, again, are two very
Mhm.
different things. So I think
Mhm.
that's one sort of hiccup that we might find ourselves in, and you feel like if I just work harder, if I just find a couple more hours in the day to get these things done, but the reality is that the tasks will keep coming. There will always be another problem to quote unquote solve. And
Right.
I
Mhm.
think realistically, if we look at that and kind of drill it down to like the foundation, uh,
Mhm.
construction, of course,
Mhm.
the foundation is that the internal structure, the internal scaffolding, if you will, is not built to support where your business is going. And so
Okay.
that's a really key thing to consider. If you are growing or scaling or expanding your practice or your business in general, is that it does require a different type of strategy. It does require a different type of leadership, especially if you're building a team. And that's
Mm.
not for everybody, and that is for some folks. And I think that's a really important conversation to be having with yourself, with your mentors, even with your team as you're bringing them in. Is what does this dynamic look like? How do you do your job that I'm paying you to do, while I, keep this business growing? So, yeah.
I think that, yeah, I think you're hitting on some really good points, with that, because I think there's so many therapists that get into private practice on their own as solo practitioners. And, it's not easy, but it's also not hard. Like, it's
Mhm.
not difficult to, as a solo practitioner, open a private practice, get clients coming in the door. Like, you can fill your practice with some work, right? I'm not saying it's easy, but it's also not impossible. You can do that. But what you did to do that as a solo practitioner, like what you did, what got you here, is not the same things that are going to get you there, right? So, when you start talking about growing or scaling and you're talking about this scaffolding that's there, right? Like, I'm thinking that scaffolding is there for one person and it's you, right?
Yes.
And it works for you as a solo practitioner. But, when you start branching out and expanding, it's like, no, 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 you need a totally different plan, right? That's what I'm hearing from what you're
Yes.
saying.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think, that can encompass a lot of different things. How do we communicate as a team? How do
Mm-hmm.
we manage the projects again as a team when it's just you and you're kind of in this silo of I'm the one who is performing the work, I am the one who's in the sessions with the clients, I'm the one who's getting the notes updated, I'm the one who is developing a course or a program, and I'm gonna do all the tech side. I'm gonna do that's fine. That's great. It's overwhelming and it is hard.
A lot,
So I
yes.
certainly don't recommend, but again, circumstances sometimes make it that way, right? Whether we
Hmm.
don't have the resources or the connections or whatever that means. But I do think that to your point, it's not the same if you're in this sort of trajectory where you're growing and you are scaling beyond, just sort of that singular sole proprietorship, if you will,
Hmm.
right? And I think it does take some work that people maybe don't expect as far as the leadership goes, right? In terms of
Right.
how am I leading this team? How am I dealing with conflict within the team? How do I have a really messy conversation with a member of my team who maybe isn't hitting the expectations that I had? So there's just a lot of different considerations, and there's a conversation that people talk about this idea of more money, more problems. I don't actually believe that. I think it's more money, the same problems, but amplified. They just mean more and they're higher stakes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I can totally see that. Yeah. Because of the problems there and you don't deal with it and then you bring in more, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. I'm totally with you. That would amplify it completely. Agree. 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 Now you're talking about, helping founders make confident decisions.
Mm.
What do you think it is that tends to get in the way of that clarity?
Mm. Immediately, my thought goes to lack of information.
Okay.
Okay. And I say that as somebody who is so strategy driven, very much here's the goal, here's the steps to complete it. I certainly have, as they call the woo-woo elements. I certainly have lots of mindset and that
Mhm.
sort of thing. I wholeheartedly believe that's a very important piece of this. I don't know much about that. And so I think a lot of folks talk about, decision fatigue, or they talk about just lacking the confidence and how that's a mindset thing. I could see that to a degree. In my world, an issue with making decision is an issue with having a system that's either broken or missing.
Mm.
I think if you have sort of these parameters in place or a precedence, right? If you've experienced something that you've had to make a decision on, you now have precedence. You can go back and reference that decision, reference the results of that decision to help you make a similar decision moving forward. On the other hand, if you're making a decision that's entirely new to you and you've never experienced something like this before, you do need to have a certain parameter set to say, how am I now being guided within the foundation of my business, with the vision and the goals that I have for where we're going, whether that's like a revenue goal or a visibility goal. And I think the only way that you can get the information that you need to make a really confident decision is to have more information.
Mm.
and
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
again be able to sort of fill in the gaps around, maybe I've done something like this before. So when I talk about information, sometimes that might just be as simple as having a very specific set of metrics that you look at on a weekly and monthly and quarterly and annual basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
That might be as simple as saying my annual goal for this year's revenue is, $150,000. And now you're going to step it all out over the next 12 months. How much does each month need to account for? And now you're tracking that on a weekly and monthly basis. Am I trending towards the successful accomplishment of that goal? If
Right.
I'm not, where am I going to pivot? That's when you need to make a decision, right?
Mhm. Mhm. That's so good. Yeah, I think, I'm thinking about first time decisions that I've made that have felt, really big. And I do think yeah, I think part of it is the information piece, right? It's like, I've never done this before. What if I make a mistake with this decision?
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes. And I
Hmm.
think it's
Hmm.
easy to also find ourselves, and I certainly am guilty of this too, find ourselves in over research mode
Yes.
where we're kind of using that as I need more information, I need more and more and more information, and we kind of can stall the decision process. So I
Mhm.
think the second piece of that is that we do have to remember that this is timely. You know, there are opportunities that arise that may not exist if we take too much time. And
Right,
so the here's what I'll say is I think it's a muscle that you flex in order to make strong, confident decisions. You have to constantly be making decisions. And on the other side of it, if it doesn't work out, if you made a choice and it doesn't come to fruition or the results aren't what you expected, you do have to develop that confidence or have the resources to then say, how do I pivot? How can
right,
I fix this?
right.
Not necessarily if this will work, but how.
Hmm.
And even if it's not the original path that we perhaps envisioned, knowing that we have the capacity, the skill, the knowledge, the resources available to us to
Yeah,
make that change if it's not the goal that we ultimately are after.
right, right. Yeah, that flexibility.
Mm,
And I think the other piece, right, like being willing to make a decision and be okay with whatever the outcome is going to be, right? And
yes.
so that might come into part of that decision making, right? Is like what is the worst case scenario, and am I okay with if the worst case happens?
Yes. Yes,
Hmm.
100%. And I think that will guide you too, right? If you're making a decision, for example, around revenue and you're thinking, okay, I have, these many slots available for client one-to-one sessions. I know that in order for me to have the time required to build out this new course that I want to launch, I have to scale that back.
Hmm.
What did the numbers say? What does that mean for you? Are you still able to cover your basic expenses within the business? Can you still pay yourself? Can you still pay your team? If you were, for example, to scale back 4 sessions a week or something like that, does it make
Hmm.
sense? If not, how else can you account for those resources, right? Can you find more time? Can you now outsource to somebody else who maybe can do it faster than you? And like I said, there's always going to be more than one way to get to the goal. It's just a
Hmm.
matter of understanding resource distribution, really. Where are the funds going? Where is the time going? Where is the team member capacity going? So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love the idea of being open to there being more than one solution to something, right? Because I think
mhm.
sometimes we can get really set with our vision, and this is what I want to do, and this is how it's going to be. But being open to the idea that maybe I can get there another way,
Yes.
right?
Yes, well,
Mhm.
because the reality is if you couldn't get rid of those sessions to clear up a day that you're going to now devote to that, or maybe you've already tried it and it's not working, and so now
Mhm.
you're going in the hole, right? Because you're missing
Yes.
those
Yeah.
client sessions. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's, hey, can I add 3 or 4 client sessions a week or a month to make a payment to somebody to build this for me?
Hmm.
Right, like,
Right.
and again, when the ultimate goal is one to many, or we're trying to kind of
Yeah.
do the passive revenue or the revenue diversification, that might seem counterintuitive, but
Hmm.
sometimes we have to make that choice in this moment to say, I'm going to offer these 4 additional client sessions. I'm going to open this day that I had blocked off because it's just not working for me to do it. I'm
Yeah.
solely using the funds and the profit from this to
Yes.
go and reinvest it.
Right. Right. Okay. Amazing. What would you say is like one small shift that tends to make a big difference fast when it comes to operational ease? Like what can we do?
I'm thinking scorecard right away.
Mm.
And so a scorecard is, and you and I, we worked a lot on this. So this is not unfamiliar to us, but for those of you who don't know, a scorecard is essentially, I mean, it could be a Google spreadsheet, it could be a note in your phone, though I don't really recommend that. But it would be a place where you have key metrics and KPIs, key performance indicators, that you are tracking on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. And
Hmm.
they are all driven by the goals that you have. So you're certainly going to have the financial goals, because the reality is that if you're not staying afloat financially, or if you're not profiting, this is an expensive hobby and not, in fact, a business.
Mhm.
And the other side of that is that you're also going to tailor the rest of the metrics to wherever you're going in terms of your growth strategy. So, for example, if you are wanting to, you've built this course, you now want to market this course, you need somebody to market to. So your growth strategy might say that your goals need to be email marketing. How many subscribers are you adding? How many emails are you sending on a monthly basis? What's your open rate? What is your click rate? But again, you're going to tailor that to what your goals are. So not every company's scorecard is going to look the same. There will certainly, again, be some similarities, especially from the revenue perspective, some things from the marketing perspective. But I do think having that and knowing that that is something that you and your team needs to have forefront, right in the forefront of your work on a daily,
Mhm.
weekly, monthly basis. It's not
Mhm.
kind of like a thing you set and forget. It's every what again, it depends on your recording, how often you're recording the data, but I would
Yeah.
suggest probably weekly at a minimum if you can do it. Monthly is fine, but not ideal.
Mhm.
But again, this is going to give you information that you're going to need when you do have to make a decision. And so you may think, oh, I don't need this right now, like nothing's happening. It really sucks to have to go back and get retroactive information to bring forward so that you can make a choice. Or maybe you're looking to sell your practice, but now you've got to go compile all of this financial information.
Right.
There's just so many different ways that we could really need this type of data. And I do think when we talk about scorecards, this is a really key thing for folks that are wanting to really be more of that founder or CEO role, right? If you're looking
Mhm.
to build your practice, the reality is that you will fall into that CEO role to a degree. And that might be your entire role eventually. And maybe you stop
Mhm.
seeing clients entirely on a one-to-one basis. Or
Mhm.
it might be sort of more of a part-time gig, if you will. But I do
Mhm.
think that we need to be comfortable when we are in that position to look at the numbers of the business, look at the metrics for our goals, and be really honest about if we're hitting them, if we need to pivot, if we need
Mhm.
to totally reevaluate the strategy because we've been doing the same thing and it's just not working. And I think that can be, it can be a challenge for folks that are coming again from that one-to-one now into more of that growth. The CEO role is a hard role and it is not for everybody. But I
Mhm.
do think that, you know, depending on the way that you want to build your business and if you're looking to expand into different revenue streams and that sort of thing, that is the area that you need to become comfortable. And a scorecard that you check in on a weekly basis is a really great start to be comfortable with data.
Yeah, I had no idea you were going to say scorecard when I asked you that question. But yeah, I think there's so much valuable information. And I think, sometimes we're a little bit afraid of numbers, but we can also be afraid of like actually knowing what's happening inside of our practices. Like when you were talking there just a moment ago, and some things that were rolling through my mind was, if your revenue isn't where you want it to be in your practice, how do you understand why that is, right? And if you've got a scorecard developed that, keeps track of how many client sessions you're having each week, how many cancellations are happening each week, how many sessions are at your full rate, how many are at reduced rate or pro bono, right?
Mhm.
You start to see what the issue is. I mean, just think about those four things, right? How many client sessions, how many cancellations, how many full rate sessions, and how many sliding scale or pro bono, right? If you're meeting your revenue or not meeting your revenue, and you are keeping track of just those four things, you're going to start to see what's happening. It's like, oh my goodness, I had a week where, I had all these cancellations, or oh my goodness, more than 50% of my practice is pro bono or sliding scale. No wonder I'm not making, and I'm making up numbers that are really easy. It's like, well, I probably would figure that out without the scorecard, but some of these things are a little bit hidden, and it's not until you have a scorecard and can start looking at these numbers that you start going, oh,
Mhm.
well, this is why, and if we don't understand what's going on in our practice, then we can't change it.
Yes.
Like I think about the lights on the dashboard in my car. I don't
Mhm.
actually know what they all mean. But, when certain ones come on, like the oil light comes on, it's like, oh, I got to do something about the oil, right? When we know what the problem is, we can do something about it,
Yes.
right? But the lights that come on my dashboard that I don't know, like what they
Mhm.
mean, I either need to look in the owner's manual or I need to go and talk to somebody who does know what it means,
Yes. Yeah, that's
right? 'Cause
exactly what I was
otherwise,
saying.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna be on the side of the road with a car that doesn't work.
Yes, 100%. And here's the thing is you don't have to know what all of the metrics necessarily mean in the grand scheme of things,
Mhm,
especially if you're building a team. If you have somebody on your team, for example, that's a social media marketing expert,
mhm,
they will be able to tell you, or they should be if they're worth their
mhm,
salt, what some of this means, what the trend is showing you, right? If you're seeing
mhm.
a downward trend, for example, like just totally pulling an example out of thin air, if you're seeing a downward trend on your audience growth, then that means that your content is not getting maybe the reach that it used to. Why is that?
Right.
Now you can start
Yes.
to investigate. You have that information. It gives you more questions to ask to then continue to uncover what the story really is, and then to now say, how am I going to execute the fix, right?
Right, right. Yeah, right. And so you're just understanding what's happening can move you from feeling like you're in chaos to having a lot more clarity, right?
Yes.
And insight into what's really going on in your practice. So I can totally see why the scorecard, why you would pick that in terms of like helping you shift into more operational ease in your practice.
Yes. And
Mhm,
I think also to just become more comfortable with the data. Because to your
mhm,
point, you mentioned sort of being a little bit
mhm,
weary of the numbers or not really, do we really want to know the whole story behind the practice? And I think especially the numbers piece, I think that's a story that we tell ourselves. I
mhm,
think especially for women entrepreneurs, it's a hard thing. Because we're the creative ones, we were the artsy ones, we weren't the accountants, and and again, everybody's upbringing and experience and background is different, but I think that can be a story that we tell ourselves. And I mean, the reality is there are so many resources now that you could fill out your scorecard, you could plug it into an AI and say, "What do you think about this?" Not that
yes.
I'm trying to talk myself out of a job. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you could certainly plug your thing into your scorecard spreadsheet into Chat GPT. Say these are my three goals. What are your suggestions on what's the data telling you? How
Mhm,
you're going to
mhm,
accomplish these goals, or whatever
mhm.
that looks like. And again, it's a robot. It's not going to be perfect, but it will give you somewhere to start, if especially if it's not your wheelhouse and not a comfortable place for you to kind of be existing in your business.
Mhm, mhm. Wow. Samantha, thank you so much for bringing this conversation to our community. I know so many in our community are going to walk away from this maybe feeling validated, but most importantly, hopefully equipped.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I hope so too. And feel free if there's any questions, you know where to find me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you've helped us see that operational clarity isn't just about software or SOPs. It's about building the practice that actually supports the work that you want to do. So we're
Mhm.
absolutely going to include links in the show notes for you to be able to connect with Samantha and explore her resources. And if this episode has sparked something for you, if you found yourself nodding along or thinking, yeah, this is what I've been missing, I'd love for you to share this episode with a colleague or leave us a quick review. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, keep building a practice that works for you. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Build Your Private Practice podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a fellow Canadian therapist who needs this. And remember, the work you do matters. Keep showing up, keep holding space, and keep building a practice that works for you. If you're looking for practical tools or support to grow your practice with more clarity and confidence, head to buildyourprivatepractice.ca. There's lots waiting for you there. I'll see you next time.